Excuse me. Hey there. Sorry, I'm interrupting myself, actually, but I want to tell you what this is. This is a free version of the Ezra Levant Show. Now, normally it's behind a paywall, and you have to become a subscriber to what we call Rebel News Plus to see it. But once a week, we take a show from behind the paywall and put it up so you can see what you're missing. Now, I hope you enjoy this show enough to become a subscriber. Go to rebelnewsplus.com. $8 a month, which is about half the price of Netflix. You get my show every weekday, plus 4 other weekly shows from other Rebels. Enjoy the show, and if you like it a lot, why not subscribe? Okay, back to the show.
Shame on you, you censorious thug.
It's so funny. There's this phenomenon, this list of things that are happening that's outrageous. And the phenomenon is that if you agree with the outrageous thing, then you can talk about it. But if you disagree with that outrageous thing, well, you're not allowed to talk about it. And to talk about it, you're called a conspiracy theorist. As in, your disagreement will not be heard on its own terms. The reason you disagree with it will not be addressed. There will be no rebuttal to your points. The very fact that you claim it's a thing will be ridiculed. The other day I showed you, for example, a new opinion poll by the liberal-linked Abacus Data pollster. They called their poll, "Millions Believe in Conspiracy Theories in Canada." But like I say, it's more properly called "Millions Disagree with Certain Decisions Being Made About Their Life." Here's what I mean. Look at their World Economic Forum question that they surveyed Canadians about. Do you believe the World Economic Forum elites have a secret strategy to impose on the world? 20% of Canadians say yes, 37% aren't sure. Well, let me help you with that. Here's Klaus Schwab, the founder of the World Economic Forum, talking about imposing his strategy on the world.
What we are very proud of now is the young generation, like Prime Minister Trudeau, President of Argentina and so on, is that we penetrate the cabinets. So yesterday I was at a reception for Prime Minister Trudeau, and I know that half of this cabinet, or even more half of this cabinet, are for our actually young global leaders of the World Economic Forum.
Yeah, so you can't really call it a conspiracy theory because it is indeed a conspiracy. They are conspiring to do it, but it's out in public, so it's more of a conspiracy fact. One of the conspirators just happens to be Chrystia Freeland, George Soros's former biographer, now our deputy prime minister, who bizarrely sits on the World Economic Forum's board of governors. How's that even allowed? Like I say, it's not really a conspiracy theory when they publish it on their website, but if you disagree with it, it suddenly becomes a conspiracy theory. The World Economic Forum is the organization. The Great Reset is their plan. Klaus Schwab published a book called The Great Reset. They have a whole section about the Great Reset on their website. Let me read a little bit from it. They say, "The pandemic represents a rare but narrow window of opportunity to reflect, reimagine, and reset our world." Professor Klaus Schwab, founder and executive chairman, World Economic Forum. Follow insights on how we can recover from COVID-19 to build a healthier, more equitable, and more prosperous future. So there it is, the Great Reset, using COVID as the excuse to rebuild and reshape the world. And when they say healthier, of course, they mean vaccine mandates. When they say more equitable, of course, they mean socialism, but a weird kind of crony socialism, really not much different from crony capitalism, where oligarchs like Bill Gates and other World Economic Forum tycoon are in charge. I mean, once you notice their language and their plans, you can't really unsee it. I mean, take a look at this.
A global pandemic.
Joe Biden calls it Build Back Better.
Build back better.
Building back better.
To do things differently. To build back better.
We're going to build it back better.
And build it back better.
It's my plan to build back better.
start taking all the problems that have been created in education and mental health and start to build back in a positive way.
I have launched a booklet called Build Back Better, Britain After Coronavirus.
It's about building this country back better.
Growing conspiracy following it. It is called the Great Reset.
An unprecedented opportunity to rethink and reset the ways in which we live.
The great opportunity for reset.
The theory even calls Mr. Biden's campaign slogan, Build Back Better, a front for the conspiracy.
Build back better.
Building back better our economy.
Build back better.
All elements of the Great Reset are fundamental to building the future we need.
This pandemic has provided an opportunity for a reset.
It's a big effort to, some would say, to build back better. We would say to really have a great reset.
Conspiracy.
Yeah, but I'd like to show you something interesting, and I'll post a full copy of this document on our website under this video. It's an access to information document, 34 pages long, of briefing notes prepared for the Prime Minister, prepared for Justin Trudeau. All about the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset. So this isn't some internet gossip, and it's not even Klaus Schwab just bragging about his claimed penetration into the Canadian government. I mean, theoretically, that could just be BS by Klaus Schwab, just some guy trying to pretend he's more powerful than he really is. No, this is what's actually going on inside our government. This is the department preparing briefing notes for cabinet ministers, in this case, Justin Trudeau, telling him what the plan is, telling him information, telling him things he should say, telling him what his role is in the World Economic Forum strategy.
My mug? I know. It's pretty cool. So is this hoodie I got on, and you could have it on too if you check out our special website at RebelNewsStore.com. That's where you can see Freedom Focus hoodies that we have for you, beanies, cell phone cases, you name it, all while supporting our journalism, where we fight to bring you the other side of the story, as opposed to, being forced by the Trudeau government to fund leftist media out of your taxes. The truth is, without you and your generosity, there is no Rebel News. So again, if you like the reports that we bring you and that we also fight for freedoms in Canada, please consider doing some shopping, picking up some swag at RebelNewsStore.com. We appreciate your support.
Let me say that again. These are internal Canadian government documents prepared by the Canadian Civil Service for Trudeau and his staff, telling them about the World Economic Forum's Great Reset, outlining what Canada is supposed to do, and facilitating that, making it happen, making meetings happen, making statements happen, making commitments happen, spending money. Or as Klaus Schwab would say, they're penetrating us. There's a lot in here. I mean, biographies of the World Economic Forum insiders. Goldman Sachs is in there. Google is in there. Plans for speeches and meetings. See the whole document for yourself, really. It's 34 pages long. It's underneath this video. But I want to focus on this master memo. This is not a conspiracy theory. It's a conspiracy. That's different. I'll read it to you now. This is from the year 2020, when Klaus Schwab realized that he could turn COVID into an opportunity to take over so much more of the world's governance. Background. This is a memo to Trudeau. Background. Klaus Schwab, the founder and executive chairman of the World Economic Forum, WEF, has invited the Prime Minister to join the launch on June 3rd of the Great Reset Initiative, bringing together His Royal Highness, the Prince of Wales Sustainable Markets Initiative, with the forum's multi-stakeholder network. The aim of the program is to have a discussion that would continue throughout the year, with the objective of developing a clear set of principles, strategies, and practical solutions for delivering a Build Back Better agenda in line with the 2030 agenda of the Sustainable Development Goals and Paris Climate Agreement. Outcomes of the initiative may be presented at the World Economic Forum's annual meeting in Davos in 2021. I mean, I really could stop here, couldn't I? I mean, it is all right there. In a memo to the Prime Minister, the World Economic Fund, the Great Reset, Klaus Schwab, nothing about democracy or voting or listening to citizens. They talk about stakeholders. That's what they call the oligarchs and masters of the universe who pay thousands, sometimes millions of dollars to be part of Schwab's private club. Stakeholders. Not even shareholders. And certainly not even voters or citizens. They have no role in shaping the future. It's for the oligarchs, your masters. Build Back Better? That's their thing. Sustainable development? That's their thing. Global warming, Paris Agreement? That's the cover for the whole thing. I mean, you don't hate the climate, do you? Then you'd better obey Herr Schwab. So after that introduction, the bureaucrats' note to Trudeau is clear in its intentions to show to Trudeau that the government has been busy complying with this new world order. Let me read. Canada has forged new alliances, including the Ministerial Coordination Group on COVID-19, and has reinforced existing partnerships. Canada has been active in multilateral forums, including the UN, G7, G20, WTO, and through our memberships in the World Bank, IMF, and Paris Club. None of these are democratic. None of these are Canadian, are they? So Klaus Schwab's Great Reset is being carried out by Canadian bureaucrats. Here's how the briefing note to the Prime Minister put it. 6 work streams were established as a result of this event, within which international organizations, member states, the private sector, and think tanks will be asked to develop concrete solutions for how best to provide immediate support to developing countries and to building back better for more resilient economies over the long term. Hang on, globalist groups, okay, private think tanks, private companies like Amazon or Microsoft? What about the Canadian Parliament? Is that simply not a part of how decisions are being made in Canada these days? I'll continue reading. The work streams are global liquidity and financial stability, debt vulnerability, private sector creditors engagement, external finance and remittances for inclusive growth, illicit financial flows, recovering better for sustainability and inclusion. Canada and Jamaica will be expected to help facilitate the forward momentum of the groups. 3 sets of milestones have been set to sustain momentum. End July, possible financial ministerial meeting during the high-level political forum. September, head of state meeting on the margins of the UN General Assembly. And December, also potentially head of state level, where recommendations will be presented. Hey, they show that the phrase Build Back Better is code for their globalist socialism. Overview of global economic impact of pandemic, impact on sustainability goals, and opportunity to build back better. Then what follows is interesting, I think. It's a list of how the lockdowns have destroyed the world economy. Now, this was a private briefing note put together by Canadian civil servants for Trudeau about the World Economic Forum and the Great Reset, and they were saying that the devastation of the lockdowns, was the reason they needed the Great Reset to build back better. But the thing is, Trudeau refuses to acknowledge that his lockdowns had that devastation. They caused that devastation. He never considered it. He never tried to avoid it. He still refuses to acknowledge it. He still is locking down our country in ways no foreign country does. Let me read what the civil servants told him in private. The global economic impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic are significant, driven by widespread social distancing and shutdowns affecting global activity in most industries, supply chain disruptions, reduced labor demand, lighter financial conditions, and lower commodity prices. Oh, so that's only acknowledged as an excuse to seize power and hand it over to foreign oligarchs, not as a reason to free our country from the lockdowns. Then this briefing note to Trudeau talks about multilateral organizations. That's just another way of saying groups with different people in it. But what's weird here is that they're private groups, crony capitalists, oligarchs, They're not even government groups like the United Nations. Who put Klaus Schwab in charge of anything? Who put Prince Charles in charge of anything? Let me read. Multilateral organizations. Sustainable Markets Initiative launched by His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales at the Forum's 2020 annual meeting in Davos. The Sustainable Markets Initiative aims to develop principles to underpin markets that are inclusive, equitable, green, and profitable, and that will generate long-term value for society, striking a balance among natural, social, human, and financial capital. Who died and made Prince Charles king? Not just king, but king of the entire socio-economic system. With COVID-19 having forced a reset of the global agenda, His Royal Highness the Prince of Wales and Professor Schwab of the World Economic Forum have partnered on the Great Reset to take advantage of a narrow but critical window to think about building back better. World Economic Forum COVID-19 related activities, recent Canadian engagement in COVID-19 related forum initiatives include the Deputy Prime Minister's participation in the May 6th COVID Action Platform, a regular discussion hosted by Professor Schwab and Forum President Borg Brende among leaders from government, business, and civil society. And Minister Champagne, that's the Foreign Minister at the time, participation on April 25th, along with Canada's Chief Trade Commissioner, in a virtual Sunday salon hosted by the Forum's Young Global Leaders community. So like I say, it's not Canada's Parliament where you have people from all walks of life represented, where you vote for your MPs, where you have all parties represented, where you have a public record of everything said. Here you have a corporation called the World Economic Forum with its Saturday salon, where these things are decided, and senior Canadian ministers and bureaucrats are participating in secret. And you weren't invited. Now, Trudeau loves this stuff. There are no truckers allowed at these get-togethers. There is no media allowed at the World Economic Forum other than state media or obedient media or official media. There's no opposition, certainly. There's no conservatives, certainly. He loves it. So Trudeau really didn't need any advice from bureaucrats on what to say. But the bureaucrats wrote notes for him anyways. I'll read it to you. Launch of the World Economic Forum HRH, His Royal Highness Initiative, The Great Reset, June 3rd. Suggested talking points. Here they are. Now, I'm not going to read all of them. Some of them are pretty trite. But look at the ones that have some meaning to them. Recovery will look different based on local and regional circumstances, but in all contexts, we must seize the moment to address long-standing socio-economic challenges and position ourselves to meet the ambitious objectives outlined in the Agenda 2020 and renew the focus on advancing the Sustainable Development Goals. So a globalist takeover of the economy using COVID as the excuse. This will require a high level of international cooperation and goodwill. We must make a joint commitment to act in ways that enable open, rules-based, and responsible trade and investment, sustainable economic recovery and growth that is broadly shared, inclusive societies that encourage gender equality, and accountable global institutions that are effectively led, responsive to shifting dynamics, and that can set the conditions for constructive global action. Now, there's a lot of BS in there. There's a lot of buzzwords in there. It's typical Trudeau. But there are some code words in there that mean something. It's socialism mainly, but it's also completely anti-democratic. You'll notice there is never any mention of citizens or sovereignty or courts of appeal. Of course not. Trudeau can't wait to spend Canadians' tax dollars on his foreign friends, especially corrupt dictatorships. I mean, let me read this. In all efforts, we'll need to be mindful of the unique challenges to liquidity and financial stability that some countries face, including those with deteriorating debt positions, lack the reserve cushion to withstand a temporary but possibly pronounced economic impact from COVID-19. It is clear that this singular event will result in a prolonged financial crisis for many countries, notably least developed and small island developing states. There are a range of measures that can be taken, including enhancing external finance, such as remittances and foreign direct investment, which will be crucial to support economies as they recover from the impact of COVID-19. And if you doubt that he meant it, just yesterday, Trudeau threw away $250 million fighting food inflation in Rwanda. No such relief here in Canada. I'll read more. These are the talking points written for him. These solutions will need to include new actions, policies, and investments that shift the world onto a sustainable and resilient path, foster good governance, inclusion, respect for human rights and gender equality, protect vulnerable groups, mitigate economic loss, and support resilience. Now, some of that sounds innocuous, but I can assure you it is not. It's political, it's globalist, it benefits insiders and the ultra-rich oligarchs who have loved the pandemic and the lockdowns, who've become rich off them. It benefits those who love control. Here's some more. As the global community undertakes immediate and long-term support for confronting this global health crisis that has caused an economic crisis, there is an opportunity to take into account our shared priority of tackling climate change and to think about how we can support our economies grow back better. In this respect, we can leverage the growing body of work on sustainable finance, which I know the World Economic Forum has been active on. Who wrote this speech for Trudeau? I mean, he didn't write it himself. Of course, we see it as written for him. Was it written by the World Economic Forum? Could have been. Or by their penetrating agent in Canada, Chrystia Freeland. I won't read any more. I feel dumber with every sentence I read from a Trudeau speech. Let me hop around to another part of this memo because its headline is so spot on. This is the very first page of this 34-page document. World Economic Forum Great Reset Dialogue. And here's a sentence explaining what it's all about. This is a note to the Prime Minister. You have been invited by the World Economic Forum to participate in the Great Reset Dialogue for the first time. The Great Reset Dialogues are a new series of virtual discussion initiated by the World Economic Forum, which focus on rebuilding the socioeconomic foundations of the post-COVID context in a fairer, more sustainable, and resilient manner. I could read the next 34 pages to you, but there's too much. And yet it's actually not enough. This memo, written in 2020 for Trudeau, didn't yet get into the real globalist agenda for COVID-19. Here's Klaus Schwab's deputy, Yuval Noah Harari, talking about the real value of the lockdowns, the real purpose of COVID-19. Take a look.
And COVID is critical because this is what convinces people to accept, to legitimize total biometric surveillance. If we want to stop this epidemic, we need not just to monitor people, we need to monitor what's happening under their skin. What we have seen so far, it's corporations and governments collecting data about where we go, who we meet, what movies we watch. The next phase is the surveillance going under our skin. We now see mass surveillance systems established even in democratic countries, which previously rejected them. And we also see a change in the nature of surveillance. Previously, surveillance was mainly above the skin. Now it's going under the skin. Governments want to know not just where we go or who we meet. Above all, they want to know what is happening under our skin. What's our body temperature? What's our blood pressure? What is our medical condition?
Yeah, they don't show Trudeau those parts, or at least they didn't back in 2020. Chrystia Freeland is the one who knows all the deeper plans. She's literally on the board of the World Economic Forum, not Trudeau. So yeah, like I say, is it a conspiracy theory? No, it is not. But is it a conspiracy? Well, it's absolutely it is. They're conspiring, they're planning. They're planning at the World Economic Forum, they're planning in the Canadian government. It's encouraging that 20% of Canadians know about all this. And it's telling that the Liberals are so desperate to stop you from knowing about it too. You can read the whole document on our website. Stay with us. More ahead. Welcome back. Well, I want to tell you, and those of you who've been following since the Sun News Network days know this, when we started Rebel News, we really didn't know if we could make a go of it because we didn't have the corporate benefactor that we had at Sun News. As you may know, that was owned by Quebecor, one of the wealthiest media companies in Canada. We were just on our own. But if you don't know this, let me tell you, the inspiration for our leap of faith was our next guest, because Anne McElhinney and Fela McAleer, two independent filmmakers in the liberal hotspot of Hollywood, crowdfunded more than $2 million an independent film. They did it through crowdfunding. It was a record at that point of time. And I thought, if they can crowdfund that, we can crowdfund a fraction of that. It gave me the courage to leap. And we've kept in touch with Anne and Phelim ever since. I've been a fan of them for years, going back to their great movie Frack Nation, which also inspired me to write my book on fracking called Groundswell. They have other amazing movies and plays. They did the spoken word productions of FBI Lovebirds, for those of you who know the story of James Comey's troops. They're working on the Hunter Biden movie right now. So many good things. But today we're going to talk to Anne McElhinney about a podcast series that they've got out right now. And I'm very happy that Anne is joining us via Skype from the Hollywood area. And great to see you again. It's just amazing what you and Phelim and your small team have managed to accomplish in the past decade. And I want to let you know, it absolutely gave us the encouragement that we could do it too.
Thank you so much. I never kind of realized that, but thank you so much. Yeah, it's funny when when you ask people, look, we've got this idea, we'd like to make a movie, you know, in the case when it started with Gosnell, and people turned up, you know, $2.3 million in the end that we raised for that movie. It's fabulous, you know, and it's inspiring, and it proves something, you know. It proves that there's a gap in the market, that there are people who are, you know, are hungry for the truth, and they're not getting it in the places that they should have, you know, the institutions that they had previously trusted have let them down very badly.
Yeah. Now remind our viewers, especially our Canadian viewers, which is the bulk of our audience, who Kermit Gosnell is, because he may well be America's most prolific serial killer, but I put it to you that not 1 in 100 people would know that if he were a notorious, you know, shooter or, you know, Jack the Ripper. But because his profession was abortion doctor, and we're not calling an abortion a mass killing here. We're doing something very different. Can you explain to our viewers who Kermit Gosnell is and why he is more properly called, and in fact, the criminal courts did find that he was a mass murderer?
Yeah, so he's an abortion doctor, and very correctly, as you point out, what was important in the trial. So what he did was, instead of doing legal abortions, which are horrific in their own right, but no, what this guy did was he delivered babies alive and cut their necks with scissors, and he did this over 40 years. So the grand jury said he killed thousands, probably thousands and thousands of children. And that's what makes him the biggest serial killer in American history, and hasn't gotten the attention it should have gotten because of the thorny subject of abortion, which of course couldn't be more prescient than it is right now with the decision from the United States Supreme Court in the Roe v. Wade case, you know, the Dobbs case, the Mississippi Dobbs case, which has overturned Roe v. Wade effectively and brought the decision about abortion back to the states, back to the people to decide, which is where it should have been. But this guy, Kermit Gosnell, extraordinary. And as you say, to this day, there's still a lot of people who haven't heard of him. And that's why we've decided to make this podcast, this 6-episode true crime podcast, telling this story, this true crime story. I mean, I love true crime. A lot of people love true crime. And it's like, if you want a true crime case, this is an unbelievable one. You have a guy here who was discovered only because he was doing illegal drug sales. So that's what brought him to the attention of the authorities. And when they went to this clinic that he ran, they walked in to what they described afterwards as a house of horrors. There was literally, the smell was like a wall that they could, and we interview all of these investigators in the podcast. And it's quite an extraordinary story. They walk in, there's this extraordinary smell, and because they're cops, they recognize it, and it's the smell of death. It's the smell of rotting flesh. Oh. He has these bodies piled up in the basement, And it's an extraordinary story. And this guy was getting away with murder, which was decided in the courts in Philadelphia. He's actually serving 3 life sentences for what he did. They took him to court on the basis of these 3 particular cases that were very, very clear cut, where there was a lot of very, very obvious evidence against him, and witnesses who saw the deaths of these children who were born alive and then had their necks cut with scissors. Extraordinary.
You know, I have such a hard time hearing this, and
I know.
And it shows what a weakling I am. I can't even hear it. Imagine being involved with it, trapped in it. And his victims were disproportionately African American and low income people. And that may have
that's
something
kind of
to
an
do with it
interesting.
too.
That in itself is a very interesting point, because you might listen to this case and think, oh my God, that's something that happened, in some backwater or some other century. No, this is this century in Pennsylvania, very, very progressive Pennsylvania, where, by the way, the politicians of progressive Pennsylvania would claim to really care about minorities, to really care about refugees. And we know from this case, from the investigation of this case, that 2 women, Samika Shaw, a young African-American mother, and Karnamaya Monger, a refugee, died after botched abortions at that clinic. And no one from the Department of Health in Harrisburg went to investigate. Kind of an amazing thing. So it really speaks a lot to the abortion issue and to what a sacred thing it is for progressives and leftists, that they would actually endanger women and children in order to protect it. And that's exactly what happened in this case. And there is absolutely no reason why we wouldn't believe that this wouldn't be happening in other parts of the country. Yeah. So it's an incredibly important case.
I find this such a heavy topic, but for those who have the stomach for it, for those who find how crime and the law come together, a 6-part podcast is the thing for you. The website is serialkillerpod.com. And again, it's not for everyone's taste. I myself, frankly, am having a little bit of difficulty even in this conversation. But for those, go ahead.
Yeah. Well, one of the things I would say is that a lot of the podcast talks to the investigators, talks to these incredible people, really inspiring people, people like, people from the DA's office, Detective Jim Wood, this incredible cop, really inspiring, fun guy as well. Steve Doherty from the Drug Administration. There's a really fabulous array of people actually in the story that make the bad stuff actually put it into kind of a different light.
Yeah, fascinating and terrifying, and so obvious why you and Phelim and your team had to fill the gap, because this is a film that no one in Hollywood would make.
That's right.
They wouldn't want to talk about it. They wouldn't want to acknowledge it. To acknowledge it would pierce their own sense of who they are, that abortions are safe, legal, and rare, and done only in, but these, these weren't even abortions. These were babies that were birthed, babies that were born and then murdered. And it's the most horrific case I've ever heard.
And by the way, to mention as well for people, another aspect of the case that's really important and that we highlight in the 6-part series is, if anyone's listening to this and has not heard of Kermit Gosnell, that should also, be chilling, be scary, actually, because it tells you a lot about the media. This story, for all its horror, is a story that's important and needs to be known because of what it tells us about public health, what it tells us about the abortion industry in the United States. And the fact that it was covered up is very disturbing, and it's not helpful to anybody.
Yeah, and there's this classic photo of a section in the courthouse roped off 4 journalists, and it was empty, and just so absolutely telling of how the media party, as I call it, is just as partisan on this as politicians are. Well, let's shift from the horrific to the merely comedic and criminal. And of course, I'm talking about Hunter Biden, President Joe Biden's son. Now, you I mentioned that earlier. The movie is called My Son Hunter. Oh my God. Tell us a little bit about that, because last we spoke, I think we were talking to Phelim, and he mentioned that you got some amazing talent as actors. And that's the thing. If you think it's hard to be a filmmaker in Hollywood who is freedom oriented or not leftist, imagine how hard it is to be an actual actor. I mean, talk about being blacklisted. Tell us some of the real stars who you got to work with you on the Hunter Biden story.
Yeah, and we shot the movie in Serbia back in October, November of last year. And we've just finished editing. We have Gina Carano, the great Gina Carano, you know, who people will know from the Mandalorian series, who was dropped by Disney for being conservative. We have Robert Davi is the director. I mean, great Robert Davi, who's been in just everything, Bond villain, you know, he's been in every movie that you've ever heard of. And we also have Lawrence Fox in the title role playing Hunter Biden, and he's absolutely extraordinary. And, you know, I think what's really great about this movie, and the movie's coming out very soon, so we will have more news on that very, very soon. We'll get back to you very soon about that, because the movie needs to come out. People need to know the truth about the Bidens, the truth about the corruption at the center of this family. I mean, you know, as Irish people, you know, we often say, like, we can't make jokes about people who are alcoholic or addicted. We can't. We just have too much of that going on. We almost invented it in Ireland and exported it around the world. So we're not making a film to be disparaging about Hunter Biden's addiction issues. We are, though, pointing out his addiction issues and asking the question, really, the movie asks the question, why, oh, why would anyone want a guy as addicted as this and in such a bad shape as this guy to be on the board of an energy company earning $83,000 a month for 5 years? Why would the Chinese be giving this guy hundreds of thousands of dollars and giving him a diamond ring, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? Why would the mayor of Moscow's wife be handing over $3.5 million to this drug-addicted guy? You know, and by the way, people are not stupid. I mean, you and I don't know in your case, but in my case, I'm often looking for donations from people. I'm saying to people, look, we're running a charity here. We're a journalistic outfit, and we're dependent on the kindness of strangers. You know, I don't get that many really large checks from people, you know? So it's not like it's a thing that happens to people. Your audience are regular folk. You know, have they been handed a check for $100,000 anytime recently? You know, it doesn't happen. And, you know, people aren't stupid. And when they do hand you over a $100,000 check, you know, they're going to get something for it. And in this case, we know what they got for it. They did get value for money. You know, and people aren't, you know, and so the film is very, I mean, it's really beautifully shot. Robert is an artist. As you say, we had these incredible people in the show. So yeah, it's coming at you soon. It's great. It's really great.
Well, and Lawrence Fox, when Phelim told me that he was the star, I thought, oh my God, he almost looks like him. And he's got that style. He's sort of thin and a little bit, he looks a little rough. I mean, I really like Lawrence Fox, but he's perfectly cast. So let me ask you this. You say you filmed it last fall. You're finishing up the editing of it now.
Yes.
Now, we talked about, you know, being blacklisted in Hollywood and stories that are blackballed. How do you plan, or have you finished your plan? I'm sure you have. How do you plan on taking this video to the world? Do you plan to release it in theaters? You're going to release it online? Is it possible that you'd get a streaming deal with, I mean, there's some very left-wing progressive Hillary Clinton-ish movies on Netflix or HBO Max or whatever. What are your plans?
I can't share our plans just yet, but basically this film will be available for everyone very, very soon. And I can hardly wait. What's really important to us is getting it everywhere. And it will be online. I can say that for sure. But it'll definitely be online. You know, because it's too important. Right. A story that was never covered properly. The New York Post did an amazing job. Should have won a Pulitzer Prize for what they revealed, and that story was suppressed by big tech, by big media, and it's a travesty, and it's kind of scary, by the way, because I think it's almost unprecedented in American history that a story of that import was suppressed in advance of an election. when the information that was available from the laptop was so significant, was so important. And no one, it's interesting, nobody from the Biden side has ever denied any of the stories that have come from that laptop.
Yeah, incredible. Well, there you have it. Our friend Anne McElhinney, part of the dynamic duo, her and Phelim, who produced so many unique films and theatrical productions. This is called serialkillerpod.com, and it's about Kermit Gosnell. And boy, did you ever give us some excitement about your next project too, the Hunter Biden movie. And good luck, keep it up. I'm blown away by your productivity and your output, and the fact that you managed to do it independently. And I say again, that is the role model for us up here. So I'm so glad you went first. Take care, my friend.
Thanks a lot. Appreciate it, Alistair.
Oh, it's our pleasure. All right, stay with us. Your letters to me are next. Hey, everybody. Well, the week has come to an end. What a busy week. I want to tell you that since the no-fly list has been lifted in Canada, at least domestically, we're going to start moving around a bit more. Drea Humphrey is off to Halifax to do some reporting there. In the United States, we're moving around too. That we were never subject to a no-fly list. We were covering the border, as you saw, between Texas and Arizona. Very interesting. We think there's going to be some riots tonight over the U.S. Supreme Court ruling on abortion. We'll have people where we expect the Antifa types to be burning in mostly peaceful riots. We're also planning a trip overseas, and I'm not shy to tell you that it is probably the largest world conference about the other side of the story for COVID medicine. It's going to be held in Brazil. We're sending a journalist there. It's basically a meeting of all the dissident doctors, the ones who said we should at least try other remedies. Should we at least test ivermectin? Is there a way of fixing this without simply buying the Pfizer vaccine? We are going to cover that very, very long journey for us to get all the way, not just to Sao Paulo, but into the Brazilian interior, where this large global conference will be held. You might know that Brazil is an interesting country when it comes to COVID. The president, Jair Bolsonaro, is a real dissident, a contrarian on the subject. So I'm excited to tell you that Rebels are going to be taking wing again. For the longest time, we were really frozen in place. As you know, we sent 6 journalists to the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland a month ago, but all 6 of them were not Canadians because our Canadians weren't allowed to fly. But I expect that we'll be covering news in faraway places now that we can, even though there are still some limits on us. That's one of my updates for you. Very exciting times. I'll wish you a good weekend. We'll see you on Monday. Until then, on behalf of all of us here at Rebel World Headquarters, to you at home, good night, and keep fighting for freedom. What you just saw was an excerpt from my nightly show, The Ezra Levant Show. Every weekday, I do a monologue. Usually it's about half an hour. Then I interview an interesting guest, and then we read my hate mail or my fan mail, whichever is more fun. It's only available behind a paywall, though. That's how we pay our bills here at Rebel News. We don't take a dime from Justin Trudeau. But the good news is it's only $8 a month, about half the price of Netflix. And in addition to my nightly show, you also get weekly shows from 4 other friends here at Rebel News. So you're getting 36 shows a month just for $8. I think it's worth it. And even if you're not quite sure, do it anyways, because we rely on viewers like you to keep us free and independent. I promise you I'll never take a dime from Trudeau. Just go to rebelnewsplus.com and click subscribe. Thanks.